Gate agent throws away. Black boy's passport. Seconds later, what he did leaves. Airline in shock. Gate 23 at Reagan National Airport buzzed with the boarding call from the gate next door, mixing the sound of rolling suitcases and the scent of freshly brewed coffee. In front of a metal trash bin filled with crushed Starbucks cups and crumpled boarding passes stood Emily Thompson, crisp white shirt, American flag pin on her lapel, arms crossed. Her right hand had just dropped. The deep blue passport of a 13-year-old black boy hit the bottom of the bin with a sharp thud. Emily smirked, voice half mocking, half daring, "Oops. Looks like you're not flying today." Zane James froze for a heartbeat. He stared at the passport like part of his identity had just been thrown away, but Zane didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't beg. He took out his phone, switched to selfie mode, framing both his face and the gate area behind him where Emily stood. His voice was calm, almost unnervingly steady for someone his age. "My name is Zane James. Today is date time, local time, location, Gate 23, Reagan National Airport, Washington, D.C., Senior Gate Agent Emily Thompson just threw my valid U.S. passport into the trash after treating me differently from other passengers. This act violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits racial discrimination by any entity receiving federal funding. This airport receives federal funding. I am recording this for legal purposes." In the hum of a busy morning, silence spread out like ripples in water. Someone gasped, "Oh my God." A man called to his wife, already raising his phone. Two college students stepped aside, turned on their cameras, switching from selfie to rear lens. A black businessman adjusted his tie and started filming. An elderly white woman fumbled with her cane, then finally tapped record. Within 30 seconds at least, half a dozen cameras were pointed toward the counter. The air shifted from routine to public evidence. Emily's face changed instantly. The smug smile vanished. Her cold blue eyes flicked toward the growing cluster of lenses. She tilted her chin at Zane. "Turn that off. Filming isn't allowed here." Zane didn't argue or lower his phone. He said evenly, "This is a public space. You are a public-facing employee performing official duties. I have the right to record for my protection and to document the incident." His voice didn't tremble. If anything, it carried the crisp cadence of procedure, the kind that makes people stop and listen. His camera panned briefly to the trash bin long enough to capture the passport resting among paper cups and napkins, then back to his face. "I'm requesting a clear explanation for being denied boarding despite having valid documents. I'm requesting the on-site supervisor." Emily shook her head. "I'm the supervisor here." She gave a thin smile, as if the word request didn't belong in a 13-year-old's mouth. Zane held the phone steadier. 3 deep breaths in through his nose, out through his mouth, timed his next words. He didn't look at her. He looked straight into the lens. "I have exercised my right to be informed of the decision to deny service. I have documented the time, location, and personnel involved. I have cited the legal grounds. I firmly oppose this discriminatory conduct." The words "firmly legal grounds," discriminatory coming from a child, made people freeze. Not just because of courage, but because of the order in his reasoning. A young Asian man in the airline's uniform name tag reading D Park approached, speaking low. "What's going on?" Emily jumped in, first clearly anticipating the move. "The kid's being disruptive, filming me without consent, and his documents are suspicious." Zane waited until she finished, then addressed Park clearly. "She threw my passport into the trash. That's a federal document. Please assist in retrieving it. It's both evidence and my travel ID." Phones around them nodded in unison. Someone whispered, "That boy knows exactly what he's doing." Within minutes, airport security would arrive, and within hours the video would flood timelines across the country. In days, the airline would face the press, But at second 45 of the clip, the biggest question wasn't what the company would say. It was how a 13-year-old could understand civil rights law better than the adults in uniform. And what would happen when Marcus James, his father, a senior ACLU civil rights attorney who had won multiple landmark discrimination cases, arrived at Gate 23 within 20 minutes. If you believe knowledge is power, hit like and subscribe. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is for you. This is the story of Zane James, the boy who refused to stay silent in the face of blatant injustice and turned a moment of humiliation into a movement for change. Washington, D.C. morning, sunlight spilled across the wooden table inside a brownstone home. On the wall hung framed photos telling the story of a family that believed in civic education. Zane shaking hands with President Obama, standing beside John Lewis, holding a sign at March for Our Lives. Next to an open suitcase, no new toys, no celebrity posters, were debate documents, a pocket constitution, and a folder labeled Passenger Rights. On Zane's hoodie, the patch, Know Your Rights, was frayed at the edges from too many washes. In the kitchen, Marcus James, Zane's father, a senior civil rights attorney with the ACLU, was multitasking frying eggs, with one hand holding a flashcard with the other. "What does Title VI say, son?" Zane didn't need to look. It prohibits discrimination based on race, color, or national origin in any program or activity receiving federal funding. Airports and contractors are included. Marcus smiled with his eyes. And if someone violates your rights, Zane, record it. Stay calm, cite the law, call you immediately. Across the table, Grace Zane's mother and a middle school principal watched him with pride and a flicker of worry. "You're only 13, Marcus shrugged, but more prepared than most adults. Zane's lessons weren't just theory. Marcus often shared real cases. He'd handled hotels denying service over dress code restaurants, checking IDs only for black customers, retail stores calling security when a black shopper lingered too long. They dissected each scenario, which rights applied, what evidence mattered, how to keep tone controlled, so the focus stayed on facts, not emotion. "Calm isn't surrender," Marcus said. "Calm is strategy. It keeps your hands steady, your words precise, and forces others to focus on what you're saying, not how you're feeling." Before they left the house, Marcus handed Zane a laminated card. One side printed Passenger Bill of Rights with clean bullet points. Right to a specific reason when service or boarding is denied. Right to record staff information, name, ID number, time. Right to request a supervisor. Federal airline complaint channels. The other side listed the ACLU's emergency number and email. The edges were slightly worn. Zane had carried it through 6 previous flights just in case. At the door, father and son recited their shared line from Martin Luther King Jr. "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Zane smiled, repeating the second half like a quiet pledge for the day ahead. Grace zipped his jacket, her hand resting on his shoulder a heartbeat longer than usual. "Text me when you're through security." TSA went smoothly. A screening officer noticed the patch on Zane's hoodie and said, my son, loves law too." They exchanged a small laugh. Through TSA, Zane texted. Then he walked down the corridor, lights glinting off the polished floor PA system, echoing final call from a nearby gate. With his tablet, he scrolled through his debate topic, Systemic Racism in American Institutions. Case studies, statistics, counter-arguments. But no matter how well he'd prepared, no debate file could teach what it felt like to be doubted for the color of his skin. Gate 23 appeared ahead. Flight 447 to Los Angeles. 45 minutes to departure. Behind the counter stood Emily Thompson, late 30s, blonde ponytail, piercing blue eyes, like a checkpoint between travelers and the aluminum fuselage beyond the glass. Zane didn't walk up immediately. He remembered Marcus's rule. Observe before engaging. "You'll learn everything you need to know about a person, his father always said, by watching how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. In 5 minutes, Zane saw the pattern. White passengers, warm smiles, small talk, smooth processing. Passengers of color, curt, tone-long ID checks, colder face. A Latino family approached. Emily, though this was a domestic flight, demanded passports. Then she looked at the mother and said, "Are these 3 really your kids? They don't look like you." The mother froze. Her eyes flicked across nearby faces, searching for a place to anchor. The 2 children held hands. The older one squeezed the younger's fingers to reassure. "Yes, they're my children." She spoke slowly, clearly, as if answering a border inspection. Emily nodded, pushed the tickets forward without apology. The family walked away, shoulders low, leaving a trail of silence behind. Zane knew the name for this racial profiling. He didn't need Marcus to define it. It was right here in the presumption of suspicion cast over certain faces and names. It was in that question, "Are they really yours?" a phrase disguised as security but aimed straight at dignity. 3 breaths in, 3 out. Zane stepped forward. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm checking in for Flight 447 to Los Angeles." He placed his phone with the mobile boarding pass glowing and opened his passport to the photo page. Emily looked up. Her eyes narrowed, unreadable. The air shifted slightly like an AC unit had changed speed. She took the passport, flipped it back and forth, held it to the light, compared the photo and face again and again. Her first words weren't, "Do you have checked baggage?" or "Would you like a window seat?" but "Something's not right with this passport." A vague statement opening a door to vaguer ones. "What specifically seems wrong?" Ma'am Zane asked, right on cue from the kitchen lessons. Ask for details when they speak in generalities. Emily ignored the question, moving on. "Where are your parents?" "I'm traveling alone," authorized minor listed in the system. Her expression tightened. She asked how the ticket was paid for, hinted the passport might be not really yours, or possibly stolen. That's when Lesson 2 echoed in Zane's head, "Don't give them an emotional lever." He calmly pointed out the match name, birth date, place of birth, photo, clean seal. Then he looked straight into Emily's eyes. "Can I ask what exactly makes you suspicious? The valid documents, the confirmed ticket, or my skin color?" The air broke. Somewhere nearby, a phone camera clicked on. A man coughed too loudly to be just a cough. "Are you accusing me of racism?" Emily snapped, chair scraping sharply as she stood. Zane kept his rhythm. "I'm asking why I'm being treated differently." And even when his nerves screamed, "Step back, avoid conflict," he stayed still because he knew from this moment on every word he spoke would become evidence. Emily tapped the edge of the passport as if performing authority, then snapped, "This looks fake." Zane replied each word crisp, which specific detail Emily didn't answer. She squinted. "I'm confiscating it." Zane spoke at once without raising his voice. A gate agent has no authority to confiscate a federal document. Emily smirked, lifted the passport from the counter, pivoted exactly 30 degrees, and raised her hand over the steel trash can. "Let's see how much your rights are worth." A dry thunk. The deep blue passport disappeared among coffee cups and crumpled napkins. A chorus of sharp breaths. A woman blurted, "Oh my God." 2 phones sprang upright. A chill shot down Zane's spine, but he caught it with 3 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth. He raised his phone to eye level, framing both his face and Emily behind the counter. "My name is Zane James Gate, 23, Reagan National Time, date. Senior gate agent Emily Thompson just threw my valid U.S. passport into a trash bin after treating me differently from other passengers. This conduct violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which applies to entities receiving federal funds, including airports and contractors. I am recording for legal purposes." "Turn that off. Filming is prohibited here," Emily shouted. Zane didn't lower the phone. This is a public space, and you are performing public-facing duties. I have the right to record for my protection and to document the incident. Emily reached across the counter as if to grab his phone. Zane stepped back, half a pace voice, still, "Even, please do not touch me. Putting hands on a minor constitutes a criminal act. Any contact is being recorded." A young employee in uniform approached, name tag gleaming Daniel Park. "What's going on here?" Emily jumped in. "This kid is disruptive filming without consent and his documents are suspicious." Zane looked directly at Daniel. "My passport was just thrown into the trash. That's a federal document and my travel ID. Could you help retrieve it?" The video captures the time witnesses and the actor. Daniel glanced at the trash can at the crowd of raised phones, then at Emily's frozen eyes. He stepped over, put on gloves, opened the lid, reached in, and pulled out the passport, now smelling of coffee. He opened to the photo page and checked the ink watermark MRZ strip anti-counterfeit light. His brow knit. "It's valid. Stamps font microprint all checkout." Emily growled, "You don't have authority to make that call." Daniel cut in firmer this time. "I have authority not to throw a customer's passport in the trash." From the right, an older voice carried. A silver-haired woman in a navy coat leaning on a cane. "I saw everything." She lifted the passport, looked the boy in the eye, and dropped it. No slip. She held up her phone. The screen showed a shaky but clear capture of the motion. On the left, a black man in a gray suit with a dotted tie raised his phone. I recorded it too. This is discrimination. I fly for work every week. I've seen this pattern, but rarely someone his age call it out this clearly. Behind them, the Latina mother from earlier stepped forward, eyes still red. She asked me if my 3 kids were really mine. Just because they don't look like me. I stayed quiet then, but I won't now. Gate 23 turned into a minimalist courtroom, witnesses lining up on their own words, becoming testimony. Zane slowly panned his phone, speaking as he filmed, "Thank you all for serving as witnesses. Please leave your names and numbers so the proper authorities can contact you. I will file a complaint under federal aviation procedures. I also request the names, employee IDs, and the exact time of this incident." He turned the camera to Daniel. "Your full name and title, please. Daniel Park, gate agent. Thank you for helping recover the document." Zane faced Emily again. "I request your full name and employee ID." Emily pressed her lips together. "I am not obligated to give that to a child." Daniel glanced at Zane. "Her name is Emily Thompson, senior gate agent. The ID is on her badge." Zane held on the badge for 3 steady seconds and read the number aloud. Another piece of the record clicked into place. Emily snatched up the desk phone. "Security to gate 23. Zane had already dialed his father. Marcus picked up after 2 rings. "You okay?" Zane kept it short. "I'm okay." Gate 23. "Passport thrown away. I have video and witnesses. I cited Title VI, the right to record, and requested a supervisor." Marcus's voice came firm and low. "Good. Stay calm. Do not move. I'm calling the airport director and the ACLU. I'll be there in a little over 10 minutes. Put me on speaker." Zane hit speaker. Marcus's voice filled the air. "This is Marcus James, civil rights attorney. Any attempt to coerce or obstruct recording may constitute a rights violation. Everyone remain calm and continue documenting. I'm en route." The name Marcus James rippled through the crowd like current. Heads lifted. A passing flight attendant slowed for 2 beats. Emily faltered. In D.C., not many frontline staff hadn't heard that name. Radio chatter and quick footsteps. 2 blue uniforms arrived: Luis Ramirez, stocky build, and Harold Williams, tall, lean gray at the temples. Ramirez raised a hand for space. Williams looked straight at Zane, then at the 20 glowing screens. Emily instantly changed tone, practiced tremble in her voice. "Thank God you're here. This boy is filming me without consent, causing a disturbance, and his papers are problematic." Zane didn't interrupt. When she finished, he brought the phone closer, voice neutral as if reading minutes. "I'm Zane James. I was denied boarding without a lawful reason, and my passport was thrown into a trash bin by senior gate agent Emily Thompson. I have video and witnesses. I am recording to ensure accuracy." Ramirez asked, "Could you lower the phone a bit, Zane? I intend to continue recording for safety and transparency." Williams studied Zane a moment longer, then asked James, "Are you Marcus James's son?" "Yes." Williams' eyes shifted. "I know him. He helped my nephew on a case a few years back." He turned to Emily. "You said there's a problem with the documents." "What problem?" Daniel held up the passport. "It's valid." I performed a visual check. "Who threw it in the trash?" Williams asked flatly. Several hands lifted their phones at once. The silver-haired woman extended hers first. "Here." Williams watched the screen, then looked at Emily. "Do you want to explain?" Emily stammered. "I slipped." The Latina mother stepped up, voice shaky but clear. She looked at the boy, raised it, and dropped it. "No slip." The man in the gray suit, Derek, added, "I have another angle." Ramirez nodded. "Please send them to us in order." Williams exhaled short and low. "Get the airport supervisor to this gate immediately." Sharp heels clicked on polished stone. A woman in a charcoal suit approached with the gait of someone accustomed to crisis decisions, Patricia Morrison, the airport's chief operating officer. She didn't speak right away. She scanned the scene recording phone, staffed 2 officers, a 13-year-old standing straight, a senior gate agent growing paler. She gestured. Williams played 3 videos in turn from 3 witnesses. Morrison watched without comment. When the third ended, she turned to Zane, voice low and clear. "I'm Patricia Morrison. I'm sorry for what happened to you in this airport." Zane nodded. "Thank you for the apology. I need accountability." Morrison didn't flinch. "You'll have it." She faced Emily. "You are immediately suspended pending investigation. Surrender your badge, radio, and access card." Emily's eyes flared. "You can't." "I can," Morrison cut in. Emily slowly removed each item, hands shaking, mouth still trying to hold a sneer. Morrison turned back to Zane. "Any other requests right now?" Zane met her gaze. "A public specific apology and preservation of all video evidence at the scene." Morrison looked to Emily. "Apologize now and state it clearly." Emily hissed through her teeth. "I'm sorry for throwing the passport." Zane didn't yield. "And for treating me differently because of my race." Silence. William spoke softly, but it landed like an order. "Say it." Emily stood rigid. Daniel set the passport on the counter, avoiding the eye-line crossfire. A man's voice came through the speaker, weighty and even. "You have 10 seconds. If not, this video will go viral within the hour, and we will file at the federal level not only against you personally, but against your employer for a hostile environment." Marcos was near the gate now, not yet in view, but his voice carried enough gravity. "I'm sorry for treating him differently because of his race." Each word scraped its way out of Emily's throat. Applause broke not a cheer, but the sound of a fact being stamped. Ramirez signaled staff to escort Emily from the gate. Before turning away, she shot a poisonous glance back. Zane didn't move. The look slid off him and fell harmlessly to the polished floor. When Emily disappeared around the corner, Morrison turned back the metal badge on her lapel, catching the white overhead light. "Your ticket will be refunded. You'll be rebooked on the next available flight, first class, and your family will receive travel vouchers." Zane nodded politely. "Those can't replace change. I want systemic accountability." Morrison studied him a beat longer. "Go on." Zane opened his backpack and pulled out a hard folder labeled Passenger Rights and Anti-Discrimination Policy Draft. Inside were organized tables, indexes, and bullet points. He outlined clearly mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing positions, not a 1-hour video, but scenario-based sessions with testing and consequences. A passenger rights board posted at every gate in plain language. An independent complaint channel with third-party oversight separate from the internal chain of command. Quarterly diversity audits made public. And a designated passenger advocate reporting directly to executives not buried under middle management. Morrison flipped through each page, her finger pausing at the 30, 60, 90-day implementation checklist. She looked up. These proposals are feasible and measurable. I'll forward them straight to executive leadership. Williams murmured almost to himself, "If this runs a lot, we'll change." Ramirez took notes, quickly marking evident seal points. Daniel stood silently beside the counter, hands clasped. Zane turned his phone toward him. "Thank you for doing what's right." Daniel bowed his head slightly, then spoke loud enough for everyone. "I've seen her treat passengers of color differently many times. I have dates and notes. I'll file a formal report." Footsteps hurried closer. A man in a navy suit appeared at the edge of the crowd, tie askew from running Marcus James. His face was both tense and composed. "Dad," Zane said softly. Marcus pulled him into a firm hug. 2 seconds later, he released him, scanning his son's face. "You're okay." Then he turned to Morrison and the 2 officers. "Marcus James, ACLU. I need the chain of custody procedure for all video evidence, the personnel details, and the scope of both internal and federal escalation." Morrison answered directly. "We're collecting witness footage and preserving it with chain of custody logs. The involved employee has been suspended, and I've ordered HR to review prior complaints. I'll report to the COO and legal counsel as soon as I leave this gate." Marcus's tone was calm, surgical. "How is your implicit bias training administered? Frequency, outcome metrics, complaint data disaggregated by race. How many cases involving this employee were dismissed?" Each question landed like an anchor. Morrison didn't dodge. "Currently annual, clearly insufficient. Complaint data will be extracted and shared with federal oversight. I'll ensure full cooperation." Marcus turned to the crowd. "Thank you all for recording and speaking up. Without you, the truth could have been brushed aside like a crumpled ticket." Several people nodded firmly. The silver-haired woman stepped forward. "We're here as witnesses." The Latina mother held her children's hands. "Thank you, young man." Derek pressed a hand to his chest. "My daughter's going to watch this tonight." Williams asked to review Zane's original footage, noting timestamps. Ramirez gathered contact info from witnesses and made a list. Daniel printed a temporary internal report. Time parties involved evidence recovered passport. Preliminary finding document valid referral to legal. Morrison took a brief phone call, said yes 3 times, and hung up. The COO and general counsel are fully informed. A comprehensive internal investigation begins immediately. Based on the on-site evidence, the suspended employee's contract is terminated effective now. A wave of murmurs spread through the hall. No applause this time. It sounded like a collective exhale at a fair verdict. Morrison turned back to Zane. "The next flight to Los Angeles has a first-class seat open. Would you like to take it?" Marcus glanced at his son. Zane nodded. "I will. But we'll keep monitoring the follow-through on these reforms." Morrison handed over her card. "I'll expect your email from both you and Mr. James. We'll move within 48 hours." Zane stopped recording. His hands weren't shaking. Maybe because everything was finally on track, the truth-documented witnesses, aligned authority, present a decision spoken in words that couldn't be taken back. But he knew this was only round 1. Training wouldn't change overnight. Culture wouldn't shift colors because of one firing. What mattered next were timelines, measurable actions, and oversight. A flight attendant stopped beside him warm-voiced, "I'm Ashley Brooks, lead attendant for your next flight." The whole airline's heard. "Thank you. Transparency like this protects us, too." Zane smiled lightly. "I just did what I was taught." Ashley tilted her head. "Wish everyone was taught that." Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder, low voice steady. "You did incredible. The rest is slow work." He turned to Morrison. "We'll submit a formal version of these proposals with a 30, 60, 90-day timeline and public quarterly updates." Morrison nodded. "Do it. This will become the new standard for this airport and hopefully for many others." The gate board flickered. A clear female voice echoed over the intercom, "Attention passengers at Gate 23. The crowd began to thin, but the air still hummed with purpose. Conversations rippled, how to submit footage, where to send forms retellings of what I saw, forming a chain of evidence. Zane looked at the polished steel trash can where his passport had once sat between coffee grounds, and then at the passport now dried on a layer of tissue. A piece of paper can be thrown away in a second. Dignity cannot. And when a community is willing to raise its phones, its hands and its voice, acts of injustice no longer fall into the dark. Zane and Marcus sat by the window in first class. The plane rolled away from the gate with a steady roar, Washington's sunset slanting gold across the aluminum wing. Ashley Brooks stopped by with a smile. "You two doing okay?" Marcus nodded. Zane said, "I'm fine. Thank you." Ashley lowered her voice. "Everyone at the airline's been talking. Some said he should have waited for legal to step in. Others said, no, this needed to be called out. All I know is having you there today made us feel safer." Zane replied softly, "I just did what my dad taught me." Ashley tapped the seat back lightly. "Then teach more people." As the plane lifted its nose, Zane's phone switched to airplane mode. For a few seconds, the screen still glowed notifications pouring in messages from the debate team, an email from a local reporter, and a social tag with Zane's name climbing the trending list. He turned the screen off, leaned back, and exhaled. He was only 13. Before boarding, he'd stayed calm enough to demand a public apology with substance to present a reform packet from his backpack. But now, mid-air, he felt hollow for a moment, like a runner whose legs still carried momentum after the finish line. Marcus poured his son a cup of water. "Any questions?" Zane looked out the window. "Do you think this will really change anything? Or will it all go back to the same?" Marcus took a sip, setting the cup squarely on the tray. No single moment changes the whole machine, but the right moments, if preserved, witnessed, and followed up with real work, connect into a line. Gate 23 is a point on that line. He tilted his head, "And you just made it shine." Zane opened his laptop. In the quiet cabin, he began typing an email to Patricia Morrison, a chronological summary of events, a list of witnesses with contact info, the attached PDF passenger rights and anti-discrimination policy draft, proposed follow-ups at 48 hours, 7 days, and 30, 60, 90 days, and a request to initiate preservation of all Gate 23 video evidence. At the end, he added one more line. "Please confirm an independent passenger advocate contact reachable outside gate-level management." Marcus opened his calendar app, blocked a meeting 2 days ahead, CCing the ACLU legal office. He didn't rush his son, just sat quietly beside him, calm as an old oak shadow. When dinner service came, Ashley returned. "If you need anything during the flight, just call me." She placed a warm towel, a small pouch with Band-Aids, ginger candy, and earplugs on the table. "These are for passengers who've had a long day." Zane smiled. He thought of the steel trash bin, the dry thud, the Latina mother's eyes, the silver-haired woman's silent nod. those faces pieced together like a photo pinned in his mind. He reopened his notes, post-incident passenger checklist 1. Save original plus backup video. 2. Compile witnesses and contacts. 3. Track milestones with airline airport. 4. File federal complaint. 5. Publish public summary. As the plane pierced a thin layer of cloud, Marcus's wristwatch buzzed softly an incoming email from Morrison. She confirmed she'd reported to the COO and legal counsel proposed an online meeting within 48 hours and made 3 immediate commitments, temporary passenger rights notices at all gates within a week, a provisional independent hotline, and an internal memo reiterating zero tolerance for discrimination plus clear intervention steps for witnessing employees. We'll need Mr. James and Zane to advise on scenario-based training content. Zane finished reading and nodded. He texted his mom a short message, "I'm okay, working on a long assignment." Grace replied with 2 words, "So proud." 2 hours later, the plane landed in Los Angeles. The mobile signal returned like a rainstorm. The hashtag had broken into the top trends. Videos from multiple angles were being stitched into a single, subtitled compilation. There were the usual cynical comments he must have mouthed off, "Don't rush to judgment." But another wave followed hundreds of small stories, forming a dam against dismissal. A young man wrote about being questioned for sitting in first class. A Muslim woman shared being pulled for extra screening because of her hijab. An elderly Asian man described someone shouting every word at him as if he couldn't understand English. Individual fragments, but together a pattern. That night at Aunt Renee's house, Zane sat in the kitchen over a bowl of hot soup. Marcus opened his laptop and joined a video call with Morrison and the airport's executive team. The split screen showed Patricia Morrison, Evan Blake, the COO in a navy shirt, and Laura Chen, legal counsel in sleek glasses. Marcus made brief introductions, then handed the presentation to Zane. He shared his screen, "Why Apology Isn't Enough from Gate to Governance." Zane walked through each slide mandatory scenario training for all customer-facing staff. Real-world simulation assessments instead of checkbox tests. Posting the passenger Bill of Rights at every gate in English and Spanish with QR codes linking to complaint channels. Establishing a third-party run independent grievance office, reporting directly to an oversight board. Quarterly public diversity audits, and an empowered independent passenger advocate authorized to intervene on site. At the end, he emphasized measurable metrics, complaint rates by race resolution, time, corrective action ratios, affected passenger feedback, and staff intervention drill frequency. Evan asked, "What can we realistically launch in 30 days?" Zane presented the 30, 60, 90-day roadmap. Laura added, "Legally, we'll need to ensure evidence chain integrity and federal compliance." ACLU oversight. Marcus nodded. "We'll monitor and support. The goal is real reform, not just liability avoidance." As the call wrapped, Morrison concluded, "We start tomorrow." "Zane, thank you. One day you should teach a full session for our frontline team." Zane smiled. "I'd be honored." When the screen went dark, the kitchen returned to quiet. Aunt Renee leaned on the doorway. "You know sometimes adults need to learn from kids." Zane grinned. "I just followed the lesson plan." Marcus looked at him. "You didn't just follow it, you turned it into action." Night settled softly over Los Angeles. On the table, the passenger rights folder lay beside the spoon, still scented with soup. Across the country, Gate 23 was dark now, but the red recording lights from that morning still glowed on millions of screens, and a new track of change had just been laid a few meters longer. The airport's temporary conference room had been transformed into a war room. Whiteboards, large screens, gate maps, and task charts divided into 24-hour, 7-day, and 30-day columns. Patricia Morrison stood at the center marker in hand, her voice firm but not harsh. 3 tracks running in parallel: operations, legal communications, and one thread that ties them all together: training. The legal team reported first 23 witness videos, collected forensic copies, made originals, sealed. Check-in system logs from Emily Thompson's terminal preserved for 6 months. All prior complaints related to Gate 23 and her shifts extracted. Official notice sent to staff mandating data preservation and forbidding retaliation. Laura Chen signed an internal whistleblower protection order. Daniel Park's name was underlined with the note "Non-retaliation letter delivered." The operations team began replacing posters at every gate with a temporary sign, a simple passenger rights board in large, easy-to-read print. You have the right to know the specific reason if service or boarding is denied. You have the right to request a supervisor. You have the right to record interactions in public spaces. You have the right to file a complaint through an independent channel. Below it, a QR code linked to a temporary third-party managed complaint form. The communications team drafted the press release acknowledging the Gate 23 incident as a serious violation, issuing a direct apology to Zane James, confirming the termination of the employee involved, and announcing 3 immediate measures plus a training rollout schedule. Morrison opened a new box on the board, Training 1.0, within 14 days. No more 1-hour checkbox videos. They invited a group of consultants to design scenario-based modules, scenes from the gate ticket counter, boarding line, overbooking cases, ID checks, each with branching decisions and instant feedback. Passengers in the simulations would represent diverse backgrounds. Ambiguous situations were written in to teach staff how to ask factual questions instead of biased ones. Local actors were hired to perform 30-minute live drills per shift. Daniel Park sat at the edge of the table, hands still clasped but shoulders lighter. When the agenda reached pattern analysis, he raised his hand. Opening his phone, he read from his notes dates, times, gate numbers, anonymized passenger descriptions. Instances where Emily used a tone of inspection toward passengers of color, asked invasive questions like, "Are these kids really yours?" or delayed boarding long enough for travelers to miss flights. Each note became a line of data together, forming a column of evidence. The legal team's preliminary review found 47 affected passengers in the past 18 months, a number likely to rise once old footage and complaints were cross-checked. Morrison circled 47 on the board and wrote, "Contact past passengers." She turned to the customer care team, reach out to every single one, offer a formal apology, invite them to a survey on their experience, and offer assistance if they wish to file a claim. All outreach must be supervised. On the monitor, COO Evan Blake joined in. No delays. We're piloting the passenger advocate program at the 3 busiest gates, 2 shifts per day. Advocates have the authority to intervene on site when differential treatment is observed. Morrison agreed. I'll assign our 3 most experienced staff rotating shifts to avoid blind spots. New name tags were printed. Passenger advocate. How can I help? Across the country, Marcus and Zane were assembling the training kit, 5 short videos each, 3 to 5 minutes, focusing on key skills, asking neutral questions, recognizing implicit bias, safely intervening with colleagues, giving meaningful apologies, and restoring a passenger's dignity after conflict. Zane added a handwritten sheet titled "Golden Rules" for the front line. Describe events, never assign motives. When unsure, return to procedure, not prejudice. If uncertain, bring in a third person. If wrong, fix it, apologize, and correct immediately. By the 3rd afternoon, the official statement went live. The language was direct. We apologize to Zane James, his family, and the community. The discriminatory act at Gate 23 was unacceptable. The employee involved has been terminated. We are implementing mandatory scenario training, publishing the Passenger Bill of Rights at all gates, launching an independent complaint channel, and piloting the Passenger Advocate program. Complaint data will be reported publicly each quarter. Under the post came the usual noise: outrage, skepticism, cautious hope. "We'll believe it when we see it." That evening, Morrison called Marcus. "Next week, I'd like to invite you and your son to a teach-in with our shift leads. They need to hear directly." Marcus replied, "We'll come. Not to condemn, but to make their jobs safer and stronger." After the call, he turned to Zane. "Which part do you want to speak on?" Zane answered without hesitation. "The part about meaningful apologies, restoring dignity, and how to pull a colleague back to protocol without turning them into an enemy." That night, the maintenance crew put up new posters at the gates. Under white light, bold letters glowed, "You have the right to be respected." Travelers glanced up as they hurried past. A few scanned the QR code. One employee paused, read the word "respected," and thought of their morning shift. The next morning, an email arrived from the John Lewis Center inviting Zane to speak at their youth leadership event. His debate teammates texted, "You could turn this case into a real-world argument format." Grace sent a photo from her classroom chalk words. On the board, read, "Know your rights." Down the hallway, a small group of students stood before a printed poster of the Gate 23 story someone had taped to the bulletin board. Morrison stood by her office window looking down at the stream of travelers. She knew some would say she'd acted harshly for PR optics, but she also knew doing nothing would be worse. Her phone buzzed Laura Chen, reporting that 2 passengers from last year had come forward with video describing how Emily harassed them at the gate for speaking Spanish. Morrison typed back one word, "call." Then she turned to the whiteboard and added the final line, "Quarterly dashboard, complaint count, resolution, time, corrective actions, dignity survey." In Los Angeles, Zane closed his laptop. A morning show had just emailed an interview request. He looked up at Marcus. "Do you think I should say yes?" Marcus shrugged. "If your goal is education and change, accept it. And remember, talk about systems, not a single person." Zane nodded. He didn't want to destroy anyone's life, he wanted to dismantle bad habits. And to do that, he'd have to keep his voice calm, keep facts in order, and keep turning one day at Gate 23 into the groundwork for a new standard. Another morning was on its way. The Passenger Bill of Rights posters stood steady on the terminal walls like small mirrors, reflecting how a city treated those who passed through it. On each one, the line, "You have the right to be respected," stayed bold, as if freshly written by a warm human hand. Across the country, a 13-year-old boy unlocked his phone and added one more line to his checklist: teach-in, prepare examples, rehearse script, invite Daniel to share for 3 minutes. He inhaled, exhaled. Not to steady himself before another crisis, but to prepare for a longer mission, teaching adults about rights through stories bright enough to light the way. The second-floor conference room overlooked the glass corridor where passengers lined up between black ropes. On the wall, the whiteboard was dense with arrows and bold words. Scenario Training version 1.0. Independent Hotline Passenger Advocate. In the front row sat shift leaders and veteran gate agents, a few faces drawn tight like buttons pulled too hard. Zane stood beside Marcus, a thin stack of 2 pages in his hand, his short speech script. Patricia Morrison opened the session briefly. She didn't sell slogans. Gate 23 showed us a tear in the fabric. Today, we stitch it back, not for the press, but for the safety and dignity of everyone passing through this place. She gestured to Zane. He stepped forward. He didn't talk about Emily. He talked about procedure. When in doubt, ask about facts, not about bias. When things feel unclear, turn to the process, not to skin color, last name, or language. When wrong, apologize with substance. Name the act, name the harm, name the fix, and commit to prevention. He gave a sample apology, plain, unadorned. "I asked you a question based on an assumption about your children. That was wrong. I'm sorry. I'll process your documents according to procedure, and I've reported this so our team receives retraining to prevent it from happening again. A hand went up an older man in a faded navy shirt over 20 years at the gates. Kid, does the public even understand the pressure we face? One extra question could stop a child from being trafficked. Zane nodded. Exactly why the question must come from procedure, not prejudice. A procedural question protects both safety and dignity. It sounds like, I need to verify the adult-child relationship per this guideline. Could you please show? Not, they don't look like you are, they really your kids. He turned toward Daniel. Daniel, tell the 10-second story from gate 23. Daniel stepped up, voice steady and low. I saw her do it wrong many times. I stayed quiet because I was afraid of losing my job. Gate 23 made me realize when I stay quiet, I become part of the mistake. At the back of the room, a few heads nodded small, but enough to show the line between silence for safety and silence as complicity was beginning to crack. During the simulation exercise, the consultants presented a scenario, a domestic flight, a mother speaking Spanish with 2 children who didn't resemble her closely. A shift leader played the gate agent, an actor played the mother, and another stood as the passenger advocate observing from the side. The agent veered off script with the first question. The advocate stepped forward. I'm the passenger support lead. Let's use the relationship verification checklist per policy. We'll need A, B, and C, and we'll apologize if the earlier question made you uncomfortable. The mother relaxed. The tone shifted from confrontation to procedure. Another shift leader interjected, what if the passenger has an attitude? Marcus stepped forward, calm and even. Attitude comes from feeling disrespected. If we stay within procedural language, that attitude has room to cool down. And if it still escalates, security protocols exist to protect everyone, but they don't replace basic courtesy. He paused. Courtesy is not a personality trait, it's a professional skill. Midway through the session, the intercom buzzed. A real incident at Gate 17, an argument between a staff member and an Arabic-speaking passenger. Morrison pointed. Who's the passenger advocate on duty? A woman wearing the new name tag jogged out 2 security officers behind her. The room went silent, holding its breath. Minutes later, they returned. The advocate reported the agent asked for documentation outside protocol. I intervened using the checklist, issued a substantive apology, and redirected the process. It's resolved. The room exhaled. A small event, but proof the new wheel had turned half a rotation. At the end, Morrison announced the preliminary numbers: 23 witness videos collected. 47 passengers affected over 18 months tied to 1 employee. 0 reports of retaliation within 48 hours thanks to protection measures. The 47 on the screen made the room fall still. Numbers didn't echo feelings, they declared facts. Zane closed with a single line, no one wants to do wrong. But if we don't learn, we repeat wrong. And if we've already erred, the fastest way to keep our dignity is to say, I was wrong, at the right moment. As the session ended, the man in the faded navy shirt stopped Zane in the hallway. I'm Hargrove. I spoke harshly earlier. I'm sorry. And thank you. His calloused hand gripped Zane's, not hard but real. That afternoon, the first version of the internal dashboard went live: complaints by race median resolution, time 7-day corrective action, rate number of advocate interventions, and dignity perception score from post-incident surveys. Morrison pointed to the screen. This is how we keep ourselves honest. Daniel quietly took a photo, not to post, but to remember the day a measuring tool stood between the gates. That night, Zane received an email from Eleanor Price. She attached an old black and white photo herself at 19, sitting at a lunch counter with friends' hand-painted sit-in sign propped beside them. Back then, we learned to sit still so people would have to look. Today, you're teaching us how to speak so people have to listen. Zane smiled. He knew if Gate 23 had ended as just a viral video, it would have evaporated like foam. But when a video sparks a process, builds a dashboard, shapes training, and teaching it becomes a thread. Night settled in. Marcus drafted the letter to the DOT and FAA through the federal complaint route, attaching all evidence and recommending oversight for reform implementation. He ended it with, "We choose cooperation before litigation. If cooperation fails, the law will follow." He looked at Zane and raised a thumb. They didn't celebrate. They drank hot cocoa, opened the window to let the night air in, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would belong to the public. The next morning, Zane sat before the camera of a morning show. Soft studio lights hid the circles under his eyes. The host asked the familiar question, "How does a 13-year-old know the law so well?" Zane repeated what he believed. "In my house, knowing your rights is a required subject. Because black kids aren't always presumed innocent, we have to prepare twice as much to earn half the respect. And because calm isn't surrender, it's strategy." On screen, the broadcast cut to the footage from Gate 23. Zane speaking clearly, the gleam of the steel trash bin, the dark blue passport being lifted back out a forest of phones raised like small lanterns. After the broadcast, a wave broke loose. Stories poured out as if a valve had opened. A black doctor questioned about how he could afford a first-class ticket. A Muslim woman sent through an extra round of screening for wearing a hijab. An Asian couple spoken to slowly and loudly in front of their child. Not everyone had video. But once the fragments were placed side by side, a pattern appeared. And then came the backlash. Anonymous accounts mocked him. "Spoiled kid, teaching staff to go soft airports aren't social experiments." One comment spread fast. "So now asking extra questions is racism." Marcus told his son, "This is the hard part. Don't fight emotions with emotions. Go back to procedure, to data, to results." They released the first public quarterly dashboard, complaints down, resolution times shorter, advocate interventions spiking the first week, then tapering as staff learned the checklist, and the dignity perception score rising steadily. The numbers weren't for winning arguments, they were for mapping progress. The staff union sent a letter of concern. Public pressure is making employees afraid of mistakes, less confident in handling security calls. Morrison invited union reps to the table. Zane and Marcus sat in as observers. Together, they agreed on a new training module. Confidence in doing right, teaching staff how to use clear procedural language, how to invite a colleague or advocate for support, and how to document interactions to protect themselves. One shift leader admitted, "Turns out this training doesn't just protect passengers, it protects us from trouble caused by skipping steps." The tension in the room dropped a few notches. In week 2, the ACLU filed a formal federal complaint with evidence attached and requested a 6-month independent monitoring period. The DOT and FAA opened an official case and scheduled meetings. The press ran with it. A few headlines went for drama, the boy who shook an airline. Zane declined the sensational interviews. He accepted only those with educational focus, youth forums, hospitality workshops, high school civics classes. There, he didn't tell stories of villains and heroes. He talked about process measurement and accountability. By day 10, another airline on the West Coast contacted Morrison asking to borrow the training kit. The Passenger Bill of Rights posters began appearing at 2 airports outside her network. A major city invited Marcus to help design a passenger rights framework for all its transportation hubs. The John Lewis Center confirmed Zane's upcoming talk at the Youth Leadership Summit next month. Grace pinned the invitation to the fridge beside his class schedule. Around the same time, a long article in an aviation magazine asked, "Is every incident discrimination or just over-thorough procedure?" Marcus replied with a short op-ed, "Thorough means asking for the same documents in the same tone from everyone. Discrimination means asking certain questions that appear only for certain faces and last names. He didn't mention Emily, he spoke about the pattern. The piece circulated quietly among professionals more than on the noisy web. By month 2, the dashboard showed results: 0 retaliation complaints. 12 advocate interventions, down from 31 the first week. 92% of staff had completed scenario training. 81% passed on the first simulation. 19% required retakes. The average dignity score after incidents rose from 3.1 to 4.3 out of 5. A comment appeared beneath the data: I used to fear flying because of the wrong questions. Yesterday, I flew again. For the first time, I felt human. At 6 months, a congressional committee invited Zane to testify at a hearing on discrimination in transportation. Marcus sat silently behind him. Zane recounted Gate 23 in 8 minutes, no dramatics, no naming names except those who'd consented to be public. He ended with 5 lines. Learn your rights. Stay calm. Record and document. Speak truth with evidence. Find allies. A senator asked, "Do you believe the law should require scenario training and independent complaint channels across all airlines?" Zane answered, "If we want safety and dignity to be standards, not luck, then yes." The draft bill began to take shape, not without friction. Industry lobbyists talked about cost logistics, federal overreach. Civil rights groups spoke of data outcomes humanity. Morrison sent a letter of conditional support. We implemented these reforms and saw impact. If the federal government subsidizes initial training and releases the toolkit as open access, adoption will be easier for everyone. A voice from someone who had implemented change nudged the pendulum toward possible. One afternoon, Zane walked into his 3rd training session. The man in the faded navy shirt, Hargrove, was now leading the new hires, teaching meaningful apology using Zane's script, but in his own voice. "I used to think apologizing made me weak. Now I see it makes the process stronger. It closes the cut cleanly so we can keep working." After class, he handed Zane a thin notebook. "I've been jotting down lines that help. If you want to add something, go ahead." Zane smiled and wrote on an empty page, "The right words are the shortest bridge between people." That night, Morrison released the final report. The airline had terminated Emily's employment, completed the investigation, confirmed 47 affected passengers over 18 months, contacted each for apology and restitution, and invited them to participate anonymously in training research. A few agreed to appear in future training videos. Daniel received an official whistleblower protection notice and a personal letter of thanks. He texted Zane, "I trained a new team today." For the first time, I didn't feel alone. Zane scrolled through messages from strangers, a boy in Chicago, filming himself being kicked out of a store for no reason. A girl in Texas writing, "I used your apology script with a classmate and we made up." Disconnected stories suddenly forming a line. He thought of MLK's words, of Gate 23, of the shining steel trash bin, of the dashboard's dry numbers that somehow felt warm. The road from an airport gate to a hearing chamber was long, but every poster, every checklist, every meaningful apology was a mile marker along it. Marcus placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Don't forget to be a kid." Zane laughed, dragging his father into the yard, kicking the plastic ball Aunt Renee had bought the day before. The ball bounced off the wall, hit a flower pot. Aunt Renee shouted, "Hey!" They all burst out laughing. The media storm outside roared on, but in the small yard, laughter laid a calm light over everything. Tomorrow they would write letters supporting the bill update, the training kit, and visit another school. Tonight they played. And that night, Zane didn't dream about a steel trash bin anymore, but about small signs at every gate reading, "You have the right to be respected." And just below a small line, "A meaningful apology makes the system stronger." The invitation arrived on a clear morning, sealed with the emblem of Congress, a request for Zane to testify before the subcommittee on transportation. He read it twice, his pulse quickening, then opened his notes file. Marcus entered, setting down a mug of hot cocoa. "We're not going to tell a story about villains and heroes," he said. "We're going to draw a map." Zane nodded, pulled up a chair, and began arranging an 8-minute presentation, a chronological account of Gate 23, the steps of intervention, measurable outcomes after reform, and a proposed federal standard for all airlines. On the day of the hearing, the chamber glowed under white lights. Zane sat before the microphone, the 13-year-old from Gate 23, now 14, his voice half a tone deeper. "I'm not here to take anyone down," he began. "I'm here to propose a standard. At Gate 23, we replaced bias with procedure, replaced voucher apologies with meaningful ones, replaced promises with measurement. If one airport can do it, the whole system can." He moved through the data slides, complaints down, response times shorter, passenger advocate interventions high in week 1, and tapering as checklists became reflex, the dignity perception score climbing steadily. A meaningful apology doesn't make us weak. It makes the process stronger because it closes the cut in the right place. A congressman asked, "What if employees need to ask questions to protect children from trafficking?" Zane answered evenly. "We ask by checklist, the same questions, the same tone for everyone. When unsure, bring in a third person. When wrong, correct." Another asked, "What about cost?" Marcus sat silently in the back row. Zane flipped to the 30, 60, 90-day slide estimating per-shift training costs and proposing federal seed funding from workforce development grants in return for quarterly public dashboards. "Safety and dignity aren't parallel tracks in conflict," he said. "They're rails that must be bolted together." After the hearing, the debate erupted. Headlines ranged from "Praise the boy who knows," "Law, language, and metrics," to "Doubt, will regulation." Weigh down the industry. The staff union sent an open letter, supportive of the goal, but worried that public pressure makes workers afraid to act. Morrison built a bridge inviting union leaders, security experts, and civil rights advocates to one table. Together, they refined the training, adding a module on confidence in doing right, teaching procedural phrasing that protects employees from baseless complaints, and opening an internal channel to report undue pressure from supervisors. Lead flight attendant Ashley Brooks said, "The checklist frees us from emotion. It's a handrail anyone can hold." The proposed legislation took on a plain working title, Passenger Dignity and Anti-Discrimination Standards. Core elements, mandatory scenario training for all customer-facing staff. A passenger bill of rights posted at every gate and in airline apps bilingual. An independent hotline run by a third party reporting directly to oversight agencies. Passenger advocates authorized to intervene on site. And a public quarterly dashboard tracking 4 indicators: complaints by race median resolution, time corrective action rate within 7 to 30 days, and post-incident dignity score. The federal government would co-fund startup training for small airports. In return, carriers would release their training toolkits under open license for others to adopt. By month 3, the bill stalled for a week in committee. Zane got the news en route to a civics class. He hesitated for a second. Marcus, at the wheel, said quietly, "You can be tired, but don't go dull." That day, Zane spoke with steady conviction. Why apologies need content, how to record name, time, place, why filming isn't for humiliation, but to keep truth from being erased. After class, a student came up to him. A security guard yelled at me for standing too long in the grocery aisle. I remembered, "Describe the action, don't assign motive." I said, "I'm reading the ingredients because I'm allergic to soy." He apologized. A speck of a story, but when it landed right, it gleamed like glass. Meanwhile, the airport's new quarterly dashboard went live: 0 retaliation complaints. 95% of staff trained. 84% passing the first simulation, the rest enrolled for retakes. 12 advocate interventions this month, half the previous. Average dignity score, 4.45. Morrison signed a letter to Congress. We have implemented these measures and recorded impact. To make this standard national, please fund part of the startup cost for smaller operators. One night, Zane received a video call from Eleanor Price, the silver-haired woman from Gate 23. Years ago, she said, I sat at a lunch counter so people would have to look. Today, you spoke, so they have to listen. Zane smiled, grateful. After the call, he reopened his Q&A for pushback file softening, yet strengthening his phrasing. We're not making the industry weaker, we're making it smarter. The final committee session came on a Monday morning. The room smelled of coffee and fresh paper. Marcus walked behind his son, offering no pep talk. A young staffer whispered, the federal version will be leaner than your draft, but it'll lay the track. When the gavel struck wood, the bill cleared committee. Half the road had been paved with data, half with stories told the right way. Online backlash flared one last time memes of the steel trash bin and the blue passport captioned with mockery. Zane didn't respond. The latest dashboard answered for him. So did the new teach-ins at 3 other airports. Daniel sent a photo him standing before a class holding his passenger advocate badge, a poster behind him, reading, You have the right to be respected. His caption, I'm not silent anymore. What had begun as a single dull thunk in a steel trash can had become numbers that spoke, posters that reflected checklists that pulled people back from the edge of wrong. And though the road ahead was still long, no one could say it can't be done anymore because they had already begun, measured, corrected, apologized, right, taught, and learned. And at the center of it all was still one boy inhaling for 3 counts, exhaling for 3, then saying exactly the words that needed to be said. 3 years had passed since Gate 23. Zane stood by the window of a public school civics classroom in D.C. Noon sunlight poured across the blackboard where white chalk spelled 2 lines. Calm is a strategy, and apology must have substance. He was 16 now, his voice carrying the low resonance of an instrument just past adolescence. Before him sat 40 students, many faces, many shades, many eyes. If what happened at Gate 23 happened to you, Zane asked, what would you do? One hand rose, I'd record video, state the name, time, place, and ask for a supervisor. Another, I wouldn't argue with emotions, I'd go back to the procedure. Zane smiled. That's the whole secret. When the bell rang, a shy girl approached. Once a teacher misunderstood me, she said. She said something that made me feel small. I remembered your meaningful apology talk. I sent it to her. The next day, she apologized the right way. I felt older. Zane squeezed her hand gently. You didn't grow because she apologized, he said. You grew because you chose to talk about it with truth and respect. The next day, Zane returned to the airport with Marcus and Morrison for the announcement of the program's first federal year results. Posters of the Passenger Bill of Rights hung at every gate, each with a QR code linking to the independent hotline. A digital screen in the main concourse displayed a new slide, quarterly dashboard complaints by race resolution, time corrective, actions, dignity score. No fireworks, no ribbon cutting, just dry words that somehow shone. Ashley Brooks, now head of frontline training, walked Zane down the corridor. We've drilled those scenarios so much, she said, that everyone knows when things get unclear, stick to the checklist. When they get heated, call the advocate. During peak season, a few ugly moments were stopped cold by one sentence. I'm sorry for that question. Let's return to procedure. From the far end of the hall came Daniel, his badge reading Lead Passenger Experience. He hugged Zane. I've been teaching the new hires using your words, but in my own voice. His eyes glimmered. You know the best part, I'm not afraid to say I was wrong anymore. On the small temporary stage, Morrison spoke briefly. We're not perfect, but now we have a way to measure imperfection and fix it. Marcus followed law can't replace conscience. It only lays down paths and guardrails. Walking them and how is up to everyone here. Zane spoke last in the fewest words. Thank you for turning apology into action and action into standard. That afternoon, father and son sat at the same cafe near the Capitol. Marcus pulled out a small envelope, an invitation for Zane to join a youth advisory board at a civil rights center. You don't have to answer yet, he said. Just remember you're still a kid. You have the right to play and to dream. Zane smiled and nodded. He knew that mattered as much as any data chart to keep part of his life untouched, so he wouldn't become just a speaker for laws and crises. Late that night, Zane got a message from a 15-year-old girl in Texas today at the mall I was accused of stealing because I stood too long near a shelf. I remembered your talk. I breathed, started recording, stated the time and place, and explained I was reading the label because of an allergy. The manager gave a real apology. I didn't cry like before. I felt like I had a place. Zane replied that strength was always yours. I just showed the path. Now help someone else find theirs. A week later, Congress voted narrowly but enough to pass a softened federal standard mandatory scenario, training visible passenger Bill of Rights, independent hotline on-site advocates at major airports and quarterly reporting. Small airports would receive startup grants. An aviation journal published a long analysis. Training costs were offset by fewer complaints, fewer payouts, and higher passenger satisfaction. A technician commented under the article. Most importantly, we finally learned to speak the same language. On a windy day, Zane passed Gate 23. The steel trash bin still stood gleaming. He stopped not to remember the thunk, but to look at the poster beside it. You have the right to be respected. At the bottom, a small line read, If your experience doesn't reflect this, call or scan the code. An elderly woman with silver hair walked past, cane in hand, met Zane's eyes for a second and smiled. No words were needed. That week in civics class, Zane ended his talk with 5 distilled lines. 1. Learn your rights. 2. Stay calm as strategy. 3. Record and document as civic skills. 4. Speak truth with precise words. 5. Find allies and be one. Then he added one more new, since the first time he taught imagine the world you want, then don't just say no to the wrong. Say yes to the right through a process everyone can follow. The bell rang. Shoes scraped the floor. A boy forgot his notebook. Zane picked it up. On the first page were 4 words, You have the right to be respected. He touched the cover, closed it, and smiled. That night, before turning off the light, Zane typed a line to himself, a quiet promise tomorrow teach one more person to say, I'm sorry, the right way. Tomorrow, measure one more thing to see if we've moved forward or back. Tomorrow, hand the mic to another voice. He set down his phone, breathed in for 3 counts out for 3, and fell asleep in a city still noisy, but one that had laid a few more meters of track. And if anyone were to ask what remained from Gate 23, his answer would be simple. Not the clip, not the view count, not a name fired, but a new habit now tucked into thousands of pockets. Breathe. Name it. Return to procedure. Apologize with content. Measure and correct. A small habit, but when enough people do it, it becomes culture. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And his part. Stand in the right place, say the right words, and do the right thing until right becomes ordinary. Gate 23 was closed, but the lesson stayed open. Breathe in 3 counts, name what happened. Return to procedure, apologize with meaning. Measure and fix every day one step until being respected becomes normal at every gate, every counter, everywhere. If you ever witness discrimination at an airport or any frontline service, what will you do in the first 60 seconds record call for a supervisor? Be a witness or stay silent? If you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, Like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next episode.